Just as I take a drink of water, it says live. It was spinning for a minute. I thought I had more time. Welcome to Vlog Thursday number 350, Ace Magic Testing, Tech Talk, and live Q&A. And there's something on my glasses. Apparently I touched them. I want to jump right into this Ace Magic before I start getting way off topic, which usually happens here, wandering around topics. So let's see. First time from Seattle using your new router. That is awesome. Always good to test the packets when you have a new router going. Man, there's a challenge I'm having. There's something right there. I got most of it off. I got enough that I can. It's not a thing. The word. I don't mind that I need glasses. Like I put it off for too long. I don't mind, but boy, I learned how much I touch my glasses. not the best thing. But back over to the topic here. These Ace Magic devices. I have a few ideas that I'm really working on for the video for this. So I'm trying to figure out how to make it a little bit more interesting or exciting on the review. And I'm going to, someone's going to celebrate this. So I'll go ahead, and it's not that I'm switching to Proxmox, but I've been playing with it. So I will be loading Proxmox on these as part of my testing, just so I can give a well-rounded, like, hey, I tried these things on this device and it works with it. So I think these are pretty cool overall. And they're really interesting to me because Wendell's mentioned this before, and so a few other people. And I think this is really going to start changing as these really powerful low wattage devices are coming more and more available to the home lab. I think it's really going to change the dynamic of the used server market, because why would you want a used server that, yeah, there's some nice things if you have a nice used enterprise server, but with electricity costs going up and the amount of power you get out of these little devices for a reasonable price point, this is not the cheapest of the mix here, but I think there's just going to be a change up that we see over time to say, hey, these low powered computers, and obviously, you can throw the Raspberry Pis into that list too. Raspberry Pi 4 being out, I'm or 5. I not a big Raspberry Pi channel. Jeff Geerling, though, has been absolutely. I watched his video on it. Like he knows those things inside and out, upside down. But I want to do back to like these Ace Magic, some more in-depth testing with these. So I want to test it with a few different things. Proxmox is going to be one thing. Obviously, XCP-ng is already on here, but I'm impressed overall with just how well these little devices work. And I think they're really going to make HomeLab a lot more accessible and affordable, and even affordable on the long term from the electricity side for people to do these. Now, the bigger concern, of course, is always going to be, what about reliability with them? And I bring that up because I have one of these in my hand, make the screen bigger. And these have weird failure modes. And you figure these are like essentially maybe a few generations ago, but like this one here, I think it's the first LAN port on this just died. But it dies with the light on, and it's a confusing problem. Like network ports just don't go bad that often. It's not a non-zero, but it's really close to a zero. It's just not the concern I have about hardware of whether or not you're going to have a network port die on maybe in a PoE switch in a harsh environment. Generally, an office setting environment like this was in. Please note the lack of dirt, dust. I did not clean this. This was pulled out of service only after a couple of years because one of the ports died. The lights come on the port, but they come on as soon as you plug it in. The moment you plug this in, they come on. And I'm just like, there might be some reliability issues that we don't know about because that was in service for a few years, and this hasn't been even around for a few years. But I think with these Ryzen systems, I think we've come to a level of engineering where even these off-brand, lesser-known companies can probably make a decent device. And I granted this one at $569 is a little bit more expensive, but if you grab a couple of these, the ability to build redundancy in your network, even if it's a home server network, is really there. And I think we're going to see some big fundamental changes with these. And maybe this will kind of bubble up to the server world market too, to say, can we build in these more compact systems? Wendell's talked about I believe it's a 2U4 blade system that's pretty powerful. Um, I haven't watched caught up with some of his videos, but I know he did some previous ones with like gigabytes and things like that. I think there's just going to be a lot of changes when we can start packing a lot of power into these small places. So I'm kind of excited about that. That's why we started grabbing these and just doing a bunch of testing. We have our internal use of wanting to send out systems like this to clients because sometimes we want to have a box there for collecting data, for being able to do vulnerability scanning. So we have our own internal use cases, but I'm going to review it running Proxmox, running XCPNG, so we can talk about what the general audience here is probably interested in doing with it. And I'll mention our use cases because we're going to be running XCPNG in there. And honestly, I've been just peaking this so it pulls full wattage, doing tons and tons of writes. And yeah, the whole, you know, reliability of it's been great. Like it hasn't overheated, it hasn't caused me a problem at all. So yeah, it's pretty cool. It's definitely interesting how it all works. Uh let's see. Let me catch up all the comments here. Afternoon, Cody. Good day from the land down under. We have more Australians here today. That's awesome. From the UK. Looking forward to the comparison video. Yeah, and well, the other thing I want to do is I'm going to put Proxmox versus XCP&G. I really never thought about doing this. It's not hard to do. I just had to figure out where the files were. I reused Phoronix for testing, and I'm going to run Phoronix on it, and then copy the Phoronix results file so it'll merge all the results files together, running the same setup essentially in Proxmox versus XCP&G. So the same virtual machine across both systems to see what the performance difference is. So I need ILO. Who wants to go downstairs in the basement? Well, speaking of that, this box just came in, and it's a remote KVM system. So I'm reviewing one of these as well, and this is going to be something so I don't have to. It's even got Wi-Fi on it, which I think is cool. I mean, the company sent it to me. They didn't even tell me they were sending it, so I don't know what it is. I mean, I do, but it's kind of a novel little box here, and I think these are cool. This is the let's pull it up too. I have not even booted it up. It actually just came the other day. BLICUB. So the whoops database connection broken. Joy. There we go. It's this device here, and I'll send a link for people to see. But yeah, there's newer KVM options, so we can control these devices without having to have ILO on them. Because you're right, I agree with you completely. I need ILO. Who wants to go downstairs to the basement? Completely agree with you. The tiny pilot. Yes, I've actually reviewed that before. The homepage of Ace Magic reminds me of a different brand. Ace Magic and another company share like the same products. They go under more than one name. I talked about that in my previous video. I linked to both pages, and yeah, they're kind of confusing. I saw a Twitter post about you scamming someone. No, I didn't scam anyone. I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm looking at my Twitter, and I have no concept of what you're talking about. I don't even see a notification for it. So no idea. I always address if this came up. Someone complained last time about something. So let's see here. Uh, Waiting to see when you mentioned the first post. That was bizarre. I love Ryzen. We're looking at a Dell R. Yeah, it is kind of cool. The more server motherboards that are having Ryzen's in there, and I have some clients with them. They're great. Tom has consistently ignored all his correspondence. Weird. Oh, okay. I see people are trying to. So let's Get rid of the noise from randos here. I don't know what this person is rambling about. There we go. Confusing LTS and LTT? I don't know. I haven't seen, it's been a minute since I seen any trolls on a live stream. They definitely come, they definitely show up. We'll just do this. There we go. All right. That has VPN support, which is actually pretty dope. Neat. What do you think of the Western Digital Ultrastar? I don't have a lot of opinions on specific hard drives. I don't study them. We usually get ones like if you look at like the 45 dry state when you're building something or IX systems, they tell us the hard drives based on performance of what they recommend. So I don't spend a lot of time like researching what the latest ones are. And I think it's kind of cool because you can get some information from places like Backblaze, but Backblaze offers you really accurate information about how those drives perform in their environment. I actually have a hard drive specialist that is going to be joining me for a really in-depth conversation about hard drive architecture and why it's so challenging to actually pick a hard drive architecture uh, and understand just the complexities that goes into building them and why it's not as easy as it sounds to actually do easily reviews on there. So yeah. It's a tricky thing. Thank you very much, William, for the donation. Greatly appreciated. What's my opinion of K8s? I don't use them, so I don't have an opinion. I see the KVM has a Pi 4 inside. Is that reliable enough for commercial use? Absolutely. There is a ton of Pis in commercial use for a lot of different enterprise applications. Well, enterprise, usually like industrial applications, probably more accurate. But yeah, Pis are very reliable. The only thing you ever have a potential challenge with when it comes to Pi is usually uh, one of those the SD cards, like if you have a write endurance problem because there's too much writing to it, that can be an issue. But for the most part, Pis are very reliable. Just a question: I want to install a short Cat6 SFTP cable between my Aruba switches and my patch panels. The only thing is the patch panels aren't Cat6A. Well, SF. Do you mean SFP cables and Cat6 cables are different formats? So I'm not 100% on your question here, but I think you're asking is if the jack itself isn't Cat6, will it cause a problem? Not likely. I mean, especially if you're using it for home use, unless you're using a cable certifier where you absolutely are trying to get 100% out of it, great. I haven't done a video in a while. Maybe I should do an updated one. I call it, I think it's titled like out of spec cabling, but works. I showed that you can even get with a Cat 5 cable, you can get 10 gig speeds out of it, even though it's not rated for it. So you can usually, there's enough overhead. And if you want to understand overhead better, I did do a video discussing cabling standards, how they're made with one of the people who makes cabling standards. And we talk about the extra overhead. So what they will certify for is this, but will they work a little beyond the spec? Absolutely. When they design the spec, there's always a little bit of extra overhead in there. So it generally works. I have an ace position with Ryzen 7 running a Ubuntu Plex music server, 1 gig port connected to Synology in my NAS for the LAN and copy music, 2.5 for my network for the stream. It works like that. This one in particular happens to have a pair of a pair of the 2.5 gigs. The one I was talking about earlier, which is share this tab. This one. So the original one I reviewed just has the 1 gig and 2.5 gig. This new one is a model called AM20. Both of those are 2.5 gig. Any recommendations for a 10 gig switch with at least 5 ports RJ45 that won't cost me an arm and a leg? Well, if it's SFP, it's going to be the UniFi one. Like, there's some good deals you can find for 10 gig UniFi switches. This one's sold out. Where's the other switching that does 10 gig? They have a couple different models that do 10 that are in the lesser price, but that's as long as you're doing SFP. When you're doing RJ45, the price is going to go up quite a bit, but the UniFi switches are actually pretty reasonably priced. There's just like this one here, your aggregation 269 for 8 10 gig SFP plus ports. Being live with YouTubers is like having a job interview. Yeah, actual IPMI is nice. I mean, the commercial clients we have, that's what we have. These are just fun boxes I like to test. They're fun. We don't have any of these deployed to clients, but we could, because sometimes you have weird controller stuff that you can't control, but you want to control, but it's not something we chose to put in. It's something we have to do. Like we have to manage, because we have some companies that are large industrial clients. You don't always get to choose some of the stuff that comes within the realm of things to be managed. You didn't choose to put it in there. It's somewhat supported by the vendor, but we also have to be able to access it. So yeah, there's all kinds of fun stuff. Industrial pies are a thing, even in explosion resistant cases. Yeah, that's probably a lot. Do you ever try deploying via infrastructure as code? Nope, not really what I do. Are XCP and VMware close enough in tech that you can have a mixed environment? What do you mean? Like you can't live. They're similar in a way that they're both virtualization platforms, but you can't live transfer one to another. So they're both virtualization environments. They're both very similar to each other. And when you're talking about the specific use case of VMware is a large company with more products, more features in terms of all the different things it can do. That's going to be beyond what XCP and G can do, but it kind of depends what is your use case. The SD card endurance has always been a concern of mine for a long-term Pi use. I'm working on a project that provisions net boot. Yes, I have seen that. One of my friends had built a whole bunch of those that all were net boot enabled. That way they could just reboot them and have new images on them, which I thought was pretty cool. Been a long time on my that I wanted to test that. Excuse me, got the hiccups. It's one of the things I think would be pretty cool to test is set up some pies so I can just reboot them to anything I want. It just been one of those projects I set aside and never really finished. Cool idea though, for sure. Great video on the cable testing. Thank you very much. If you just look for like 10 gig, look for Game Changer cable. That is the brand name, is Game Changer. I have a whole video on why that cable can go further than the other cables. MikroTik 10 gig is not bad. The problem with MikroTik is their interface is there's a steeper learning curve. Some people say it's easy, some people say it's not. That's a matter of opinion. Read through the documentation before you buy a MikroTik. It's the things that I would say are easy. I say like TrueNAS is easy and I do videos on it. And then someone says, but it's really hard. And same thing with MikroTik. I don't do it very often, so it takes me a minute to get through some of the MikroTik stuff. But for people who do MikroTik every day, it's fluid. You're like, oh yeah, you just do these commands and it works. So if you connect two ends of a building, but couldn't run new Ethernet optical for reasons, would you use Mocha coax power line? Probably point to point. If I can't get a fiber run across the building, Ethernet or fiber, I would probably go point to point. We have done point to point on a lot of occasions. So your recent video with Jason seemed as there's a preference for Meraki hardware over hardware. Do you guys battle it out between pfSense and Meraki when it comes to deployments? Not always. It just kind of comes down to the use cases. Yeah. If you have, we talked about a client that has a bunch of compliance requirements, and they're just going to go with Meraki because it just fits into what their auditor will put in there. I got an argument with an auditor because pfSense will pass compliance, but then the insurance company says it needs to be a managed threat management tool on there. Someone has to be actively engaged on it. So now pfSense isn't a fit to meet that requirement. So there's nuances to it. It's not really a battle. It just comes down to fit of what the client needs. Are they in a regulated industry that requires that, et cetera, et cetera. Do you use Docker or rather VMs? Yes, it all depends on the use case. I'm more partial to virtual machines because I like that everything's very segmented and there's less concern about any type of lateral movement between there. But it kind of depends on uh, the use case of it. How long does it personally take you to crimp a Cat 5 EN? I have not timed myself. I'm really bad at it. I was never good at it. So minutes for each one, maybe 5 or 6 minutes. I don't know. Awesome. Found the video. More info on my questions. We are replacing the switches in our school with 7 locations. We want our new cables between the switch and patch panel, but all material is still below Cat 6. I mean, it should work. If the budget's there, replace it. I mean, it depends on the budget constraints. Like if you can't replace it, you're gambling a little bit. Ideally, you want to rip and replace. It will probably work. I mean, I'm doing it probably, but because I don't know the equipment. But I've had and still, matter of fact, I think right now, no, not right, not. I think one of the patch panels at my office, even though we're running Cat 6 and we have 10 gig across it, I think we replaced it fine. But one of them was an older Cat 5e panel. It just worked. It's in my old videos, and it was like someone's like, "You can't run 10 gig through it." I'm like, "It works." Like I plugged it in, I get 10 gig. There's no errors on the port. Is that a guarantee? No. Would I install that at a client or a production system? Not recommended. But if the budget constraints are such that you can't deal with anything else, then but if you're not running 10 gig, it matters a lot less because Cat 6 is going to max. If you're doing the Cat 6a, it's going to max out, potentially 10 gig. That's awesome. But if you're only going to traverse 1 gig over it, well, 1 gig will traverse even if you're downing it to a Cat 5e connection. I guess the easiest way to get cable certified access is to make cables that will be X plus bit. Yeah, the certifiers measure the distance, and if you go over in the distance, you're not going to pass the certification. Insurance causes so many stupid rules and jobs. Yes. Do you recommend router board? Was it RB7? One of the MikroTik. The problem is, and the reason I never recommend them is because I just don't use them that much, and I just really think the interface is clunky, and so I'm not a huge fan of them. So we never recommend them. But the people who know them really well recommend them because there's people who become experts at using them, so they like using them. I mean, they've certainly had their share of security flaws, but they've been patched. Like when there's security flaws found in the MikroTik stuff, they patch them. I think they had some really terrible defaults, which got them an even worse reputation because they shouldn't have had the terrible defaults. Because if you are competing to make the cheapest devices, there's a correlation between often the newer and less skilled people who are in tech buying the cheapest devices, which is the recipe for botnets. That's how botnets get formed. Someone says, I want to buy the cheapest thing. Oh, it has a complicated interface, but I'm just going to next and yes my way through this setup and get it pretty basically set up, not realizing the default setup left things open from a security standpoint. So yeah, that's fun stuff. Why is Windows long-term support so hard for Windows purchase? I have no idea. That's a Microsoft question. Microsoft makes things hard. Microsoft makes licensing hard because they're a company founded by a lawyer. Yes, Bill Gates, the Harvard grad law school dropout, is why. pfSense has good defaults. Yes, by default in pfSense. UPnP, not turned on. WAN side, also locked down. That's default on pfSense. I actually like there was a post in CSSense asking what should be changed from the defaults to make it better. And the one of the developers replied, if there were better settings, they would be the default settings. They always try to make the best default settings, which means, especially when it comes to firewalls, a more secure setup, which is what you want for any of these. All right. Now, on to another topic is that, let me make sure I know which one I'm talking about here. I did this video, so I'm going to reference the video. Cybersecurity question. Okay for admins, use psexec. You should really lock down what the users can and can't do, and that becomes a much more complicated topic. So, every environment's different. We have some environments where you don't expect any type of unusual things to be run, and you have some environments where, especially developer environments, where there's all kinds of different things that are going to be run. So that's not like a yes, no, this is it type question. Why do companies use close eyes third-party tools like CrowdStrike or Newscope and forget the basics just to be compliant? I don't know. Your point about power usage is good, but also have to count the heat generated by larger servers as cooling becomes a large cost. Yes. But this other video I linked here, this is all about the new WebP vulnerability. And I see one more question. Have you ever wondered how client isolation works on Wi-Fi APs like UniFi? Is it just blocking broadcast traffic? Yeah, if you use a guest isolation, then it's doing it actually in the system itself, the access point itself. It just doesn't allow it to talk to the adjacent things. It's firewalling it off. So it's pretty basic. So I know how it works. And for developers, there is PAM solutions. Yes. We talked about that. There's a video on Business Technicalities where we dive into the PAM solutions we use. We call it the Client Protection Matrix. You'll find linked in this video, Lawrence.system/biz, and that is, or Lawrence.video/biz. That's our Business Technicalities channel. We cover all the different tools we use. It's a long video, but there's links in there. There's a forum post. We dive into all the tools. So lots of work to remediate. Yes. The remediation problem, though, and there's a lot of people asking for lists of things. And let me pull up this because I want to discuss this. This is something that's kind of getting out of hand, in my opinion. We'll pull up this one because this was an example where someone said, "Oh man, Etcher is vulnerable," and I'm like, So yes, Etcher. The tool we use, if you're not familiar with it, Etcher is a tool for flashing USBs. Great tool, very popular. And someone's like, oh no, it's vulnerable to WebP. And let's see. Is it this one? Okay, they updated it now. So they have the update on there. One of the comments in here, it's not this link, it's the wrong link. But one of the things they were pointing out, with Etcher, great, they fixed it, and it should be fixed. But people are starting to talk about applications that there's no path to execution. I think, yes, these libraries should be fixed, but if you're using a tool that will not view WebP, that means there's not a path to exploit it. They bundled this all in Electron, which means it's in Electron, and yes, that there is bundled within this Electron framework that vulnerable feature, but they're not using it. And that is where some of the challenges, where a lot of people are kind of going back and forth about this. And I get it. It should be patched, but you don't need to go into full panic mode because all these things, like a lot of these companies, they don't prune properly is the way I would describe it. This is kind of the flaw of modern software development. What they're doing is they go, hey, we need to make this application work across several platforms. Let's just use Electron so we can package this. Well, that's great, except the problem becomes Electron has a lot of baggage with it. There's a lot of extra things. Are you going to take the time to only meet the dependencies you need, or are you just going to go, well, why prune it? I'm not, using any of those. So here's my app that writes to a USB drive, which doesn't view images at all, by the way. Well, technically it views like disk images, but it doesn't view WebP files. Therefore, how would you get code execution? Now, that flaw in WebP, you send a mail crafted WebP to a messaging app that processes the WebP image and allows you to pivot out of that and then find your way to code execution on the system and break out. That's definitely a danger. But if you're not talking about an app that views WebP files, the risk is a lot lower. That's where some of the challenges become. Now, no, this is where software bill of materials would help greatly because a lot of companies don't have good software bill of materials. But there's kind of another reason they don't is because they're like Electron, and you're like, wait a minute, your bill of materials got a mile long. Why would these libraries to do this even exist in a tool like this? And this comes back to, we try to find some of the easiest paths to develop, and this has led to frameworks with more features than needed being added in. It's just kind of a whole circle on there. So yes, it's a security thing, and yes. Watch my business technicalities channel. You have to get out and meet people. That's what we talk about all the time. There's no secret sauce. You have to go out and meet people. You have to go out there, be willing to make 1,000 phone calls and get rejected almost 1,000 times and then make another 1,000 phone calls. And I'm not exaggerating when I say sometimes you have to go meet 1,000 people or make 1,000 phone calls and try to figure it out. If you want to see one of the hardest parts of IT and why I tell people, are you sure you're ready to start a business? It's the marketing component. You can have the most awesome technical skills. I have a friend like this. He's like, oh, I think I want to start a business. I said, I don't doubt your technical acumen in any way. He's absolutely brilliant at what he does. But I said, how you getting customers? He just, I guess I'll talk to people. I mean, that's you mean you want to talk to 1,000 people at least. Like, you have to really commit to things like that if you want to do marketing. There's no secret sauce on that. Are there any new vulnerabilities in Microsoft? Or are they still trying with patching Azure? The fun part is cloud things like Azure don't get CVEs. So who knows how vulnerable things were or are in any of the Azure stuff at all. So it's a weird day when an IDE is ever susceptible to a CVE. Yeah, this is mostly focused on desktop applications more than anything else. That's why this is going to be one of those things that's going to linger on for a long time because some company's going to have it hanging out there and they have some image processor, some image manipulation tool, and it has this in there. I haven't looked at it. Maybe it updated. I don't really use GIMP very often, but I know, GIMP does WebP images. Undoubtedly, it's vulnerable to this. But I'm also never opening WebP images with GIMP. It's just not something I do. DaVinci Resolve has it bundled, but DaVinci Resolve, especially in Linux, maybe it works in Windows, but in Linux, if you try to drag a WebP file in DaVinci Resolve, it doesn't like it. It wants a PNG. So I don't know how you would get in my DaVinci Resolve tool, how you would get code execution for this. So I'm still running my DaVinci Resolve editing suite, even though it is potentially running with these vulnerable libraries, but there's not a path to get execution. How would you do this? You have to get the file to me first. The biggest vulnerability, the biggest threat surface is going to be browsers and messaging apps. And this was found in a messaging app. So this started with BlastPass and figuring out how things got on the iPhone. So that's this one here. Let's see. Why do I got notices? A bunch of emails. I'll close them. All right. But BlastPass is that iPhone zero click. Once again, they sent an image that exploited this and leveraged. It was a chain of events, but being able to, first you have to leverage an exploit and then you got to figure out how to deliver a payload and figure out how to actually make it actionable. But yeah, that's how all this started, was sending images to iPhone is what discovered this. And as the research came out, it turned out that this library not only is in iPhone, but in everything. And then we learned it was not just all the browsers need to be updated, but all the applications that eventually can render those images. And this is very true. Memory and disks have become so much less expensive. Like if you watch, and I was at the Vintage Computer Festival and talking to all my vintage computer friends and discussions, and it's a different world they lived in. They had this much. They had this tiny little box. This is as much as we can do. This is the limitations of the memory, the processor, and you had to try to use things in the most efficient way possible. Now we have so much RAM, things can just be huge. They can just throw an entire library of things and stack their tools on top of that and stack another framework on top of that. And next thing you know, your printer driver is 300 megabytes. And you're like, wait a minute, there's probably only a kilobyte of driver and the rest is some framework and a bunch of BS they loaded in there. So yes. What do you mean clouds don't get CVS? They aren't vuln or what? It's not. This is a really interesting topic. And Wiz Security has covered this a couple times. There's not a CVE when a flaw is found in a cloud problem. So when Wiz Security, we'll pull them up real quick here. Wiz Security. This is a fun topic right here. This particular one and two called, I just like it, Bing Bang. Bing Bang Boom. So Bing Bang is how a simple development mistake could have led to a Bing takeover. These are security researchers who poked their way through the Azure system and found a way to get to the Bing management dashboard through a series of interesting methodologies. There's not a CVE for this because they don't issue CVEs for cloud. This is a flaw in the way Azure worked, the flaw in the way Azure did security. There's no CVE. Look at the recent Microsoft. I did a video on the Microsoft losing their key. If you look at each one of them, there's 5 separate things that were found flawed in Microsoft's key signing methodologies and in their, not just their key signing, but the scoping of a key. So the key should have been scoped to a lesser amount of privilege, but it wasn't. But note, all those Microsoft has claimed to fix, there's no CVEs assigned to it. Microsoft says it was broke, it's fixed now. You have to take the word for it. So it's really interesting to kind of think about it from that perspective. They don't assign a vulnerability to it because there's not a version number. Like when Azure fixes something, it's not like, oh, we were using Azure 1.6 and now Azure 1.7. That's because when you're doing it at the cloud level, it doesn't increment like that. There's not like a new software version. It's a, hey, we found a way that this pathing didn't work or this scoping was wrong on these keys, and now we need to fix the scoping on the keys. It's a binary answer. Has the scoping been fixed, yes or no? And there's not like a new version number that we see of the software to say it's there. So it's an interesting challenge. My Windows firewall rejects Open VPN network and it's a different subnet. Are Windows firewall rules better than that? It's rejecting it because that is the way the default firewall rules are in Windows. That can be overridden and changed. You can do an allow to allow those your Open VPN to talk to it. You probably answered this 1,000 times. What would an all-in-one system, TrueNAS, virtualizing, pfSense, Proton, email server, Bitwarden, having separate systems on bare metal? I mean, I like separate systems, but yes, you can. Wendell has a video titled "The Forbidden Router." I think that's what he titled it, and it's a fun dive into virtualizing everything. I think it's neat. It's a fun challenge. It's not for the newbie. If you're a new person getting in technology, this could be discouraging for you, or it could be very rewarding if you figure it out. It's a more complicated setup to do that, but it's, if you're willing to work through any of the issues that may arise from such a setup, awesome. And you will come out of it better than you came in. You will have a learning experience setting this up. If you're someone like me, yeah, I've set it up before because it's not hard for me to set up. Like I know exactly what to do. Wendell did a video on everything, what to do. He's got a good write-up on it as well. That is why they use a null terminator save strings in memory, but it can be vulnerable to buffer overflows. You read past it, gets removed in red. Yes. So what's the logic between not issuing a CVE for a public cloud provider is found to have a vulnerability? And but how would you? That's back to my point of how would you issue it? Because there's not a version number. How do you know that you could, if you issued the CVE, how would we know when it's fixed? Like, oh, don't use version 1.6 of Azure. 1.7 is the good one to use. You don't get the choice of what to use. That's why they can't issue a CVE, so they can just close it. And companies like Wiz can do security write-ups, and then we know it was fixed, but there's not a history. Matter of fact, what the only challenge this really comes is you can't go to the CVE database or vulnerability database, because it's not like Wiz is the only company who's poked at Microsoft. Wiz is a recent company who's poked at Microsoft and found some flaws. That's actually where the bigger challenge is finding a write-up to the history of these flaws, so you can maybe establish patterns of behavior. Now, why are patterns of behavior matter for a cloud company? Well, where there's smoke, there's fire. So if we constantly see that they've had scoping problems, and there's been several researchers that have tested different segments of scoping problems, I bet there's more scoping problems. And that's it can be like, if you're looking at a history of CVEs, looking at you, Fortinet, if they find that there's Fortinet buffer overflows and the way their OpenVPN handles things, it turns out the way their VPN handles things can be a source of pain, which it has been. The number of CVEs in Fortinet that are all related to the same area, not uncommon. When there's a CVE in one spot in a system, there's usually ways to pry there and find more CVEs around that same system, unless it gets a full code rewrite. With clouds, we don't really know. They fix the things that are known to them, but how many things are unknown to them, we don't know. Windows Forbidden Router videos are amazingly fun. Yes, I used to run that kind of setup. Trouble is, Proxmox updates took everything down. That's why I don't run it either that way. It's only about 40 years since DOS had a 640 kilobit limit. It's been a minute. I do, when it comes to the firewalls, I like the firewalls on bare metal more than anything else. Like, I can deal with my virtualization server being down, but if my internet's down at the same time as virtualization server, I really don't like looking things up on my phone to troubleshoot. Like, hold on, let me read this command off my phone. Oh, here's the command that fixes it. Oh, it's a lot of characters. you know, and you can use a hardware firewall, not this particular one because it's broken. Well, three out of four ports work on this. The firewalls, hardware-based firewalls, it just doesn't take a whole lot to run pfSense. You get one of these and you can go pretty far with them. You can have a used computer. Granted, the wattage usually keeps people from doing that nowadays. So at least having your firewall on bare metal, I think, makes a lot of sense. Virtualizing everything else, hey, that a case can be made for that too. No versions exist, but they can record dates at least. I think they should do this. So when something was vulnerable. So the example with the Microsoft one. So how long were these not scoped properly? Because that means anyone with this particular security key can do this. Do you have to notify everyone? I don't know. I think there's probably ways we could create like the cloud history from these companies. I don't know who's going to maintain or run it, but at some point that seems like a not unreasonable thing. Would you recommend Hyper-V over Proxmox or vSphere for Windows environments? Nope, I don't recommend Hyper-V to anyone. I think at some point Microsoft will drop Hyper-V. Call me crazy here. There's going to be a time in the future when I think Hyper-V is going to just kind of not be something Microsoft offers or supports anymore. Free software that will auto patch? No. Bare metal on pfSense. I'm virtualized. I hate using my phone for anything but phone calls. I don't even like using my phone for phone calls. If you really want to get deep into weeds of string handling, buffer overflows, look up Linus Torvalds. Plus, yeah, yes, you're not wrong. STRL copy, STRS copy, or STRL cat. Yes. Totally agree here. But I don't know, back to some of, rolling it back a little bit. The whole CVE thing is patching everything is just a job. It's what we do. And the worst offender is Microsoft. It's so hard to patch for them, but other software companies also are equally not great. Yes. Only reason you use Hyper-V is if you are very sensitive to Microsoft OS licensing and live in a 100% Microsoft world. Yes. Hyper-V is alive and kicking on desktop, and it's suitably replaced for Oracle VirtualBox and the non-existent Broadcom VMware player. Um, I mean, VirtualBox works fine. I guess, yeah, I don't know. I'm just not a big Hyper-V fan. Of course, I don't run Windows. I'm a Linux guy, so I don't think much about Hyper-V. We support Windows customers all the time, but we got to split. We have customers with VMware. We do a lot of consulting. I mean, VMware and XCP-ng. Pretty much, those are the two hypervisors that are prevalent amongst our client, and VMware more so. We probably have more clients running VMware. We do a lot more consulting with XCP-ng, but we do a fair amount of VMware consulting as well. What do you even pay you IT guys for? We never see you. Yeah. When you patch everything and everything goes smooth and nothing explodes, they want to know why they're paying you, because nothing exploded. But then when something explodes, what do we even pay you for? Yes. Yep. I still have VirtualBox on my computer. I don't use it very often. I pretty much use it if there's something I have to do in Windows to demo for a video. It's convenient because it's on my desktop PC that I can just record it on the screen. That's it. That's all I have. Like, I don't use it. I boot it up more often just so it has all the latest version updates, because I hate when I have to do a video and Windows decides we're gonna update. Oh, now this is gonna take a minute. And I have a fast system, but Windows, why are Windows updates so slow? I don't know. The way they're written. It's just part of the fun, I guess. All right. I don't know that I have many other topics. You going to the MSP event in Chicago, October 13th, IT Compass Group. I was not planning on that. That one's not on my radar. What is? I know I'm going to be doing IT Nation, but I don't know when that is. I also know I'm going to a data center. So I'm doing a tour. A data center invited me to film. So once the details are worked out, I'd love to talk about that. That's going to be exciting. So I'm going to, it's going to be a data center in Chicago. That's, they told me we're working all the details up, but so far it looks like I'll be able to film there. I'm all for it. So I'll be bringing you a bunch of fun video from inside a data center, including, I believe they have flywheels, and they said they can talk about the flywheels. I'm confirming all this. Once this is confirmed, I'll be doing a data center tour and covering all the stuff. What are your thoughts on UNVR? UNVR Pro is a recent upgrade for 12 cameras. I haven't used their NVR finder in a long time, and it depends on if those cameras are 4K. I have an NVR Pro. It works. They're okay. I like Synology better than VMware because of the expandability. But for a lot of basic home uses, it starts with fit. Does it fit what you use? Does it fit your needs? I don't think it's a terrible product. It actually works pretty well. The one we have at the office, we've had for a long time. Let me log into it. It's been a minute since I looked at it. Pull up the Office NVR here. Oh, I guess I got to log into it. There we go. Oh, no one's at my office. So we have one of these UNVRs, UNVR Pro. Works great. Like, we don't have any issues with it, but I just think there's it does good job for the basics. I think it's kind of cool the way you can scrub through footage, see who's been walking around in the office. That stuff works really well for it. Actually, look at the rear camera. The quality is good. Vehicle detection. So let's play back the vehicle detection here. It says there's a vehicle. There it is. So I think they did a nice job on these as far as like usability and everything. Quality looks good, but for like, someone had messaged me just the other day, like, oh, how do I back up my UniFi NVR? You should do a video on it. I'm like, there's no official way to do it, so I'm not doing a video on it. If backing up is one of your requirements for your NVR to make sure you have offsite data, don't buy this. It's not designed to do that. What features would cause you to choose VMware over Proxmox or XCP-ng on the assumption that you need a feature given a customer's new upgrade deployment? Um, Not it's usually when they need like Horizon or something like that. There's not an equivalent in Proxmox or the XCP-ng for like the full Horizon delivered applications. Uh, so like that would be we have a client using it, so that would be one of those things that means we're probably not doing, VMware, or we're not probably doing XCP-ng for them. So there's usually limited exceptions like that when there's something that's exclusive to VMware that they're using. Regarding Windows firewall blocking OpenVPN subnet, could I use pfSense outbound net to spoof the same subnet, VPN, and LAN? I don't. There, I've never tried. There's probably a hacky way to do it. I wouldn't do it though. That's that. I mean, I imagine you could do a layer 2 and make it work, but it would work terrible. There's a reason it works the way it does. It's better to modify the Windows firewall because that is your path of least resistance to get the thing done versus trying to spend hours doing something that it wasn't supposed to do in pfSense to obscure and make it look like it's coming from the pfSense gateway instead. I did try UDM Pro last year. It's a disaster. In terms of management, UDM doesn't offer much. Yeah, their firewall rules are really bad the way they work. So last week you said ntopng uses a lot of money. Do you think a Xeon is enough CPU horsepower, not cause event, or should I upgrade to the dual? Well, the question isn't about if it's enough horsepower. The question comes down to, well, here's an example, and I'm going to log into my home one here because I'm using ntopng. I have a lot of connections, a lot of things in my house. So I'm talking about a home user, but my system here is about the same speed as the one at the office, which has even more connections on there being monitored. So this is a let me find it here. So here's my system, and it's one of these Celeron J14 J4125, and we'll say CPU Mark. So this processor scores all of 2972 and it runs it fine. So what is the one you said? You have a Xeon E5 26797. So what we do here, search. What's the model number again? So E5 26797. Here, I'll do it this way. Faster if I do it this way. There we go. So this one scores 20,000. So it's 10 times the processor of mine. So yeah. There's not really a comparison, but it all comes down to what are you running? Someone asked me how much logs this is a discussion I had. Someone wants to build a log server. They asked me how much storage they should get. And I'm like, well, what are you doing? They're like, well, I'm running 2 large hospitals. And I'm like, well, that still tells me very little because you're going to have to start figuring out what are you logging? What do you want to log? How many connections are there? So yes, it's a big medical facility, but you start doing that. So using ntopng, how many connections do you have a million connections, 6 million overall connections you're monitoring? Is it a 10 user network, 1,000 user network, a 10,000 user network? I don't know. Those are the questions that you have to do for scaling on this. But for my home use, my simple little processor here, my Celeron J1425 runs ntopng fine with a CPU mark score of 2,972. Let's see. What is VMware Horizon? Horizon. Where's there at? Essentially, it's a VDI solution. So VMware Horizon Virtual Desktop Intro App Delivery. This will let you do app delivery. It's integrated into there. We got some clients using it. It's a beast of a product. It's expensive product too. So, do you have any guide on graphing metered PDU? Nope. I don't even have a way to meter my PDU. So, I think my home use will be roughly on par with your home use. Thinking on top will be fine. Yeah, that's the thing. There's a lot of confusion always around pfSense. People assuming they need a way more processor than they need. I'm what I probably would consider a power user. I've got OpenVPN running. I've got WireGuard running. I've got site to sites running. I got a lot of things that tie and run my, not incredibly fast connection. And it's not even my CPUs is idle the whole time. It just barely uses any CPU power to doing this. Citrix and Zen, king of VDI. Citrix VDI is Zen server XCPNG is something completely different. There's a ton of naming Citrix did that's very similar, but not similar in actual product, only similar in naming. So yes. Something the data center video will show, they measure, I don't know if I'll ask if how they measure individual racks. If they do, they measure power in the data center for sure. Well, it's a colo, so they probably have it broken down. As I've been in some data centers, but because they're not part of a colo, they're not measuring at all the individual wattage of the rack. But I imagine if you're leasing it out, maybe they do. But then again, I doubt it, because when they're providing you a rack, they tell you what the max amp is for the rack. You have this many watts. You can't consume more than this many watts. This is how it works. Have fun. Here's your stuff. Here's your connections. Yeah, the servers themselves do have it, and you're measuring it, differently when you're measuring it in a server versus measuring it at the rack level, because there's always conversion losses. This is actually why, and I believe it's Facebook demoed this years ago. It's all part of the open rack initiatives. Like, if you centralize one power supply with some level of redundancy in it, it's actually like a dual system, and then one conversion of the 240, because a lot of the rack stuff will be powered at 240 because it's a more efficient power delivery, and then they power everything else DC in each rack. That's actually a better way to do power delivery, because if you think about it, each time you have a power supply, there's an efficiency loss converting DC to AC, converting AC to DC. So we track power through the ports on the PDU, but the facilities team is using a special app for that. Okay. The facility team is going to measure, because they need to figure out how many watts the building's using. But I imagine they measure a lot of it at the primary UPS. Yeah, granted, it was forever ago that I worked in corporate. We measured everything by the UPS. That was the UPS had a certain load, and we wanted to make sure we kept it under certain capacities. So we didn't care about what was plugged in necessarily in a specific manner. We made sure the overall performance of the UPS. And of course, we had plugs labeled around the building, and someone would always plug an electric heater in there, and you'd have to run around screaming at people to find out who did that. Can you add a second router to access the internet through an uncontrolled router? I don't understand that question, but it's kind of a roundabout answer. You can actually have multiple gateways. So you could have more than one router. It just kind of depends on the setup of what you're doing. you can specify more than one gateway. So I'll answer it like that, but I don't know exactly what the goal would be for that. So possible, yes. Practical, probably not. Key for us is balancing out the phases and not overloading the PDU. Yes. Can you imagine how YouTube has to manage DC regarding storage, scalability of database, et cetera? I'm wondering how this is done at scale. Really interesting to see how it's done at scale. Building out very huge scaled systems is the hyperscale companies. They're using all kinds of interesting stuff to build. And like Facebook, I remember there's a couple write-ups. Facebook has a really interesting, they write stuff. I don't know what they do today, but this was a few years ago. They released how they write things in PHP, but it all converts in real time to some type of compiled C programming. So they could still write in a language they knew, but it compiled it down to be faster. There's a lot of stuff at these hyperscalers that's being done that's very different than what you may be doing on your desktop. In a way, it's similar, but it has to scale out in a very different way. I see here's an interface outbound stats widget on pfSense dashboard. It says 7 to 15 max. Is this only on VLANs? Worrisome running? I wouldn't worry too much if you're not having problems. If pings aren't dropping and packets aren't going to the bit bucket in the sky, you're probably fine. So I don't really know what interface errors you're talking about, or if they're not affecting you, it's probably not a big deal. Like, let me see, does mine have any interface errors? Oh, where can I pull that up at? Try to see where it'll give me the details. Is it under diagnostics? I've not. It's something I so rarely ever have to look at is interface errors. I've not seen it be a problem in forever. I'll figure it out later. That good forum question if you want to talk more in depth about what you have. I'm seeing inconsistent behavior with VLANs on ntopng. I added all my VLAN interface to monitor, and they all show up in ntopng, but the traffic mostly shows in the base interface, not the VLAN. I don't know. My VLAN interface shows up. They mine are working, so I'm not sure why yours are not. Yeah, dashboard interface statistics. I was just trying to see if I could pull it up without it having all my stuff in there. So does it show? What does it show when I pull that up? Because it's actually, yeah, I can drop this on here. It shows, apparently I have 408 errors on that interface, 5 on this one. So some of them have errors. The WireGuard interface has some errors. There's 4 on this one. So I don't know. In terms of troubleshooting, not something I talk about very often because it's not where my troubleshooting usually is. It's rare. It's not as zero that I've never had a bad cable, but it's very uncommon to have a bad cable. Now, this is an exception. This has a bad port on it, but the port doesn't even work. So there's not even there's a link light that stays on, but pfSense on this thinks there's not a link light at all. It thinks it's disconnected. Oh, yeah. I wonder what those indexes look like. Huge. The way they do all the replication between them. Is it one of those add to the homepage in pfSense? I'll drop it in, and I'll drop it in the forums. Yeah, I mean, but if you're seeing an error, is it causing you a problem? I always start with that. I mean, if it's not causing any problems, then what are we going to base it on to troubleshoot? We can swap cables and see if the problem goes away. We can swap it to another Ethernet port, see if the problem goes away, swap different ports on there. But if you're not experiencing packet loss or drops, then we're moving it around to see if we can get the errors go away, but the errors don't have a ton of meaning. That's where the challenge comes in on there. So hopefully that makes sense. All right. Anything else for the live stream here? Example, I see PS5. Yeah, I don't know. Mine works. I don't look at it very often. I do wonder something interesting. Like I wonder why something's using a lot of bandwidth. I look at it, and when I've looked at it, it's working. I can't really reveal it here because it would just have all of my public IP information in here, and I don't feel like dealing with that. So I don't know. Post in forums. That's my answer. Post in our forums. If you're having a problem with it, best thing is to definitely do that. I saw LTT video on level 1 text. Wendell, KVM, have you ever used it? No, I haven't. I'm familiar with it. I've talked to Wendell about it. I just don't have a need to switch things that are on DisplayPort, but I know when people do, Wendell is the only one making the device. Like I've always been fascinated the fact that Wendell built it. Like that alone, always. I know he worked with some different manufacturers, like he mentioned in there, but the fact that Wendell is doing that level of work is just impressive. Wendell's a wicked smart dude, and that was another like he has a video where he just talks about cabling standards. It's an older video, but boy, I mean, he really dove deep to understand the problem to build the solution. So I think it's awesome. I just don't really need it. Have you ever done two pfSense installations, both having VPN, making the other pfSense VPN data go through the first one, VPN inside another VPN, that is? I don't know why you would do that. Now you can redirect users, but actually redirecting a pfSense itself, that would probably be a big headache to where you say only connect here and then pipe all your data out here because pfSense has its own data stream. Now you can redirect users, so they use that one, but once again, terrible idea, just causes a headache. Not that you can't do it, it's you run out of bandwidth. Usually you're trying to squeeze everything out of one location, so you're tunneling from over here a group of users and popping them out over here. If it's a couple of users, sure, but yeah, I don't know what problem you're trying to solve with that too. I mean, you could just do a full tunnel VPN and it'll squeeze the users out of that, but even that sometimes causes you run out of bandwidth. Any place for pfSense tutorial for using all ports in a switch like mode, but multiple VLANs on all ports? I mean, you can take and set all ports as trunk, but I don't understand what the question is. You can set all ports as trunk on like UniFi, for example. So, but I don't understand what the goal is. Two different VPNs, so the second VPN company doesn't know where you are. I mean, I guess. I mean, you could VPN from one and hop to another. I don't understand what the use case is. It's yes. You could do that. I just don't understand the why you would do that. Maybe I ask why too often. I don't know. I've joked around with people like I don't know why you would do that, but this is how much we charge for consulting and setting it up. I think it's we actually had this recently where someone asked me they paid me for consulting to tell them about a product they wanted to use, and I said I wouldn't use that. You're going to run into a lot of limitations. And now they're consulting with us to get the product out of production because we didn't recommend it and they tried putting it in. After a few months of floundering with it, they're now going with the idea that we have. And I'm like, okay, I mean, we'll take care of it. I never say it, I told you so. I just say, here's my bill. Like, do you ever set a single dedicated porting a router like an access port that only you configure the router and browse the internet? I did that recently. It's fun. I know how to do it. I don't really do it because that would be inconvenient. Snort on pfSense. Do you use IPS policies? Yes, but it's not that simple. It works. You can do it. But the problem that people learn very quickly is if you set it to like security and max detect, you'll spend a lot of time chasing false positives. That's the way that works. How would you maximize your security? If someone were to, you're not really, VPNs are about hiding some privacy. I don't know much about security from a VPN in terms of that. Like, so you're gonna, I mean, if you're paying the bill on the last hop, they still know who you are. If you're doing it from a friend, that friend will, if you're doing something where they have to trace back to that person, they will then find that connection in that system and then jump over to you. So I still don't understand at all the purpose of that. I want to be able to plug in 4 switches and a mini PC running pfSense, 5 ports on it, 1 for RAN, but I want to have multiple VLANs across everything. Switches are for UniFi. Looks like I had to configure everything per port. I mean, are you trying to create a lag between 4 ports? You could do that if that's what you're trying to do. You can't really you can pay VPN bills anonymously, but you usually can't pay internet providers anonymously. I mean, maybe Comcast will take my money, but I'm pretty sure Comcast has to have a name. Your ISP usually wants a name in order to set up billing. They want an address, and yes. So that would be like, at some point there's a paper trail of it. Tor, as I see was mentioned here, would be part of it too. Well, if there's no lag, then you can't just connect all the ports that way. With no lag, you may as well just use one port. I don't understand why you'd want to use multiple ports. Second VPN doesn't know the ISP. Well, how would it not? I don't know. I'm not you. That's a flights of fancy. Have fun with it. Trying to have something like a more home router set up where all the LAN ports are like a switch. You want to go from, I have a video on how to set this up, like with UniFi switches and pfSense, for example. You set a trunk port, and you just want everything on one network. Well, then you don't even need to use VLANs. So that's probably, I'm probably describing it to everyone, which is why I'm Googling on it for someone who are, yeah, it's, I don't know what, if you can set up VLANs or you cannot use VLANs. You can have one port that goes into a switch and then everything can just plug in there. Just like one big trunk to a core switch. Yeah, you just send all the VLANs on there and then it's a core switch if all the ports are trunk. I guess I just don't, I'm confused about the goal here. I want to help, but I don't know I don't understand what this is one of the things I've talked about is what the goal is one of the questions I have a lot when people post in forums. Sometimes they write too much. It makes it hard to answer. And I'm always like, you should start with, what first step when answering a forum post or a question is, what are you trying to do? So what is the outcome you're trying to get to? What do you think is stopping you from that outcome is the second part of the question. And the third one is at least give me some details about what errors you may have. And that's it. You don't need to add everything else. Because there was a couple times someone actually had DM'd me because they were upset I didn't answer their forum post. And I said, 1, there's no question mark. 2, there's 3 paragraphs. But after they DM me, I looked at the 3 paragraphs and I said, I think you're asking about a hard drive, but you had an entire discussion of your history of using a NAS system and a history of using TrueNAS. But I don't know what the question was. It felt like just a long 3-paragraph statement. So I always try to get people like, narrow down to the goal. Let's talk about how we want to get there. What do you think stopping you from getting to what you want to achieve, and going from there. My 5G unlimited ISP doesn't require a name and takes several possibly untraceable sources, but I use my credit card. Sounds like you possibly desire to use criminal activity. So I'm not going to name my ISP. I mean, like I said, there might be some ISPs out there that do this. I I've never really researched it much. But thank you very much for the donation. It is it is very interesting that there's companies out there doing it, but they're not long for this world in the big picture. At least not in the US. That's just the it's not going to fly with governments, no doubt. I get the need for privacy. I'm not saying we shouldn't have a more privacy focused world. Don't get me wrong. I am a very strong advocate for privacy. You know, hiding your real identity is a real need on the internet. The problem is the internet wasn't designed. It was not architected for anonymity. So you're fighting a system not designed for it, and you're fighting a lot of lack of any privacy laws that would give you more rights. I'm a big fan of Cory Doctorow. I am also here. I'll show you. Got my updated card here. I am a member of the EFF. So yes, I donate money on a regular recurring basis to the Electronic Frontier Foundation to fight for rights and privacy. Big advocate of it, but I'm also telling you it's not easy. I know it's not easy because I'm involved in the things that we want to do to fight this. I also backed Cory Doctorow's latest book on the Seize the Means of Computation. Great book, by the way. So is his other one, Choke Point Capitalism. Both really good books talking about how many of these companies are just slimy and their relationship with their users is terrible. And I love that he coined the phrase shitification to talk about this greatly. I am a big fan of Cory Doctorow and all the rights about privacy. So definitely it's a near and dear to my heart, but that's also why I know it's not an easy solution. I'm looking at a backup solutions for my TrueNAS box. Even Blackbleed is starting to make more metal look cost effective. Any solutions I can fire up, ingest the backup, and shut down again? I mean, you can fire up another TrueNAS box and clone to it and then shut it off. Brian Moses has a write-up on this, was talking about these. I built a TrueNAS running on a Zima board. The Zima board, pretty cool. Definitely can solve some of those problems for being low power and things like that. But it still has to be turned on and off. So that's kind of the annoyance. Can be used for good or bad, but that's how life is. Oh, absolutely. The internet can be used for good or bad. There's no doubt about that. It's not the technology that's the problem. It's how the technology is used. I can walk in 18, buy a 5G access point, monthly SIM, cash, no ID or account. Do they still let you do that? I just don't know. Because I've never tried to be that anonymous. Normally, if I want to be anonymous, I don't even go to an AT&T store. I can find somewhere that has Wi-Fi access and use it. You're describing how I feel about searching for recipes. Yes, I agree. I'm a very brief, just give me the ingredients list. I don't need the history of this. That doesn't add to the recipe any. I mean, there's times maybe I want to know history of something, but that's not the same time I'm looking for a recipe for something. Home automation. What do I do? Yes, I am a big fan of Home Assistant. I need to do a video on it because I know more and more people were talking. Apparently, Hugh, I seen Rossman had done a video on the latest thing that Hugh had done screwing people over. And he, yeah, the Hughes decided to change terms and conditions, et cetera, et cetera. So it's probably a good time to do a video on this, but I have a bunch of stuff on my Home Assistant that automates things. So it's completely self-hosted, locally managed, doesn't require internet. If a thing happens, mostly it's just turning lights on and off on an automated basis. And actually my studio is controlled via this as well. So I can turn my studio and the different lights and cameras. I can turn this camera on or off. So this is like my studio camera that I can say, I hit this button, it goes off. I hit this button, the lights will go out on me. I can turn this one off. I think you can see this one behind me. See how you see the purple on the door? If I turn this off, the purple goes away. I turn it back on, the purple comes back, and I can change the color of it. So if I wanted to have red behind me, there we go. I should change it. Yeah, now I got red behind me. I love Home Assistant for automating things. It's pretty cool. Uh, let's see here. Have you read the Snowden book? Yes, I did. It was great. I thought it was a really good book. I recommend it. I think it's a good read because it is abstracted from all the BS surrounding it and more concise about the things that happened. And I think we have a better version of the NSA today because of Snowden. That's my opinion. I'm not an insider by any means. I have never worked for them, but I think the highlighting of problems they had in the past has led to a more cooperative future where they realize they should be protecting us. I applied to a mortgage recently, and the application said they will send my data. So good luck with that. Probably. Yep. We people in Western countries do not even know how bad it can get when government spies on your internet use. People have different rights in China. Well, there's a different right set or lack thereof in China as well. So definitely all of these have a lot of issues. In most EU countries, there is no such thing as criminal activity on the internet. A judge won't send citizens to prison for something you have done on the internet. That depends which EU place it is. So certainly, certain cybercrime is looked at as crime, but there's a reason a lot of the threat actors are hiding in areas where it's not treated as a crime. So it does vary from place to place. Yes. SIM can be pinpoint tracking. Yes. I just got my new firewall last night, the N100 dual 2.5 gigs. Sadly, they are Realtek, but pfSense seems far okay. I think they've gotten better with a lot of the Realtek stuff. I read that Amazon may be charging for Alexa. I've never used it, and I don't plan to use it. Well, I take that back. At one point, I got sent a free Alexa device. We set it up in the kitchen of my office. Therefore, we could play with it knowing that we were talking in front of it, awareness. We chose to set up the Alexa, which we know is not privacy oriented, so we could goof with it at work. We do not use this. I don't think it's been plugged in a long time. So, but that's as much Alexa as I've ever used. It's really not my thing. What do you know about core boot? I mean, I'm not a core boot expert, so when you isolate IoT on its own, VLAN should Home Assistant reside on a same VLAN or also be segmented from the IoT VLAN. I do not put Home Assistant on the IoT VLAN because you can set it up so Home Assistant can reach out to the devices. But more specifically, I use this. I have an extra one because I'm playing with another Home Assistant. This does both Z-Wave and Zigbee. My IoT devices, if you will, are most of them are Z-Wave and Zigbee. Therefore, they don't have internet access at all. They don't have a different VLAN because they're all controlled wirelessly through this. Therefore, it doesn't matter. Like I do have Ecobee for my home furnace controls, thermostat controls. So I do have it reaching out to that, but that doesn't mean it needs to be on the same network. I have the Home Assistant reaching out to it. So yeah, Home Assistant doesn't need to be um, on a separate network. I don't have the kind of connections with Raspberry Pi for them to send me out a new Raspberry Pi 5.2. People in China have rights. China's a very complicated situation. It's weird how I don't know. It's a different culture. So you can definitely say that they have a human rights problem. That's not in question. It becomes a more complicated topic because the culture and values are so much different in China than they are in other parts. This goes through to any region, and I don't know the easy answer for it. I definitely think they have a long history of human rights atrocities that I do not agree with. It's not aligned with the way I think. So that's all I can. Yeah, I don't know really what to do about it right now. It's something I have concern for, but I don't know. There's times in my life where I go, I don't know how to fight the problems I see there. So I just donate money to the EFF. It's my easy, if you want to call it a cop out solution. My company must co-op with China because we got branches there. I'm assuming you mean branches. And let's say you want to create an SSL server for a website, can be done in a Chinese citizen and go website. Yeah, they have a lot of rules around that. We had a few clients years ago that they finally got rid of all their China stuff because it was just too much trouble for them. They also realized that the things they were manufacturing there, by having a division there, they realized they were actually copying them even to more of an extent. So, yeah. Is there a good thread light bulbs out there? Is any good thread light bulbs? Are you asking about light bulbs in terms of IoT light bulbs? I have some of the lights that are in here are actually those Philips Hue lights, but because they work off of uh, their Z-Wave, I think Z-Wave or Zigbee, whichever protocol they're using. um, I don't have to actually deal with them. They're Hughes lights, but I'm not using anything Hughes. They don't talk to the internet at all in order to work because they're just using the Z-Wave or Zigbee protocols. If you go on the Home Assistant site, there's oh, is it a good Thread is a protocol? I've not used Thread. Isn't what is that new one called? There's a new IO. I know there's a new one. It also has a name. What was that one? Two. Yeah, there was. I seen Stacy on IoT. I listen to her sometimes, and she talks about it because you have. There's a whole list of them. Yeah. I don't keep up with this. It's not my. There's Z-Wave. I know Z-Wave and Zigbee because those are the ones I'm using. There's a bunch of them out there. I'm not an expert on any of those. Matter. That's the other one. Like, what a dumb name. At least Zigbee and Z-Wave you can Google and find. Matter. That's the. I need to get a smart light bulb that turns red when I'm in a meeting. Too many people walk in. Yeah, and I don't have that as a problem as much, but no one really comes to my office because I'm downstairs. No one feels like walking downstairs to my office while I'm working. So that's why, other than my son, who purposely comes in here knowing I'm on a live stream, that's a completely different topic. He knows I'm on there. So yeah, that for the most part, I don't really have it as an issue, but I could put like an on-air sign outside my office door. That would work. Oh, Thread is a new radio spec for the new Matter protocol. It's like a Zigbee 2.0. Got it. My lights turn on and off fine with Zigbee. Ain't broke, don't fix it. I also don't want to change out my light switches. They work. They turn on, they turn off with my I think my lights are Z-Wave. I'm pretty sure. I bought them on Amazon. I made a list. Let me look up my Amazon history. If I put in because these are the ones I'm using. These are ones I installed. They work. These work great. These are the in Brighton Z-Wave smart toggle switches. They no problem. They have been absolutely my Raspberry Pi that runs Home Assistants in the basement. These are around my house and they work wonderful. I've had no problems. I bought these as it says here. Last purchase in January. I installed them as soon as I got them. I installed them and they've been working fine for what has that been, like 8 or 9 months? Yeah, I know there's a few different Wi-Fi ones. I didn't want any of the Wi-Fi ones because I didn't want to deal with putting them on the network. I use the clapper to control various lights. Yes. Just clap on, clap off. Those are great. I like those. I haven't seen one of those in a long time. But in a few years, you may not be able to buy. I don't know. If they go, Z-Wave Zigbee's been around a long time, so I think there'll be a number of years you can still get them. Random thought for a video, but just bought a pocket-sized router for $100. Can use for my phones as a hotspot, provide internet, has Wi-Fi ports and WireGuard. Yeah, I never use those things. Is the problem? The little hotspots. I use my phone as a hotspot in rare occasions. Oh no, I don't care if my son walks in. He wanders down here. I'm indifferent to it. He sometimes just shows up, wandering in on me. I'm indifferent to it as a event. He usually comes down here because he wants pizza or something. It's also his little nod to me to say, "Hey, let's go ahead and order a pizza, Dad." So I'm fine with that. I know he's playing video games right now, which he'll probably want a pizza, and I'm out of water. I didn't bring enough water down here, and I'm thirsty. He's not watching right now, so no worries of that. He's apparently no pizza due anytime soon. Yeah, he is 17, so he's completely capable of letting me know when he's hungry. Because that's what teenagers do. They hide in their room playing video games, and when they want to let you know they're hungry, they come out of the room and say, "Feed me." But I'm going to wind this down here. I'll see if he wants food. I got a few things I want to go do. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm just babbling, so I don't want to just drag this out. Love doing these live streams, and I will see everyone later. I got to finish a review on the Synology and this box here, because this box is pretty cool, but I haven't really dug into it yet outside of looking at the website on it. So, yep. Have fun, everyone. Hit me up in the forums. If you want to answer those complicated questions, I do like the forums when we have a whole, good discussion on some of it. That is the place for it. Is TrueNAS Scale the best FOSS for file serving versus Ubuntu? TrueNAS Scale is going to be more appliance and turnkey versus you could use Ubuntu. It's just more manual to set it up. That's the easy answer. I don't know which one you'd rather set up, a turnkey appliance with all the features and a web interface, or manually setting up things in Ubuntu. Both will get you there. They're going to get you there in different ways. All right. Thanks, everyone, and take care.